You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, Internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Attention business owners and independent contractors. This is a money-saving message from Tax Mediation Services. If your business owes $20,000 or more in taxes, we can help you today, right now. Listen, dealing with the IRS is no picnic. It's an intimidating and extremely stressful process, and you don't want to go it alone. Our attorneys know every law, every tax break, and every possible opportunity to help you resolve and reduce your tax debt. And if you owe more than $20,000, you may be at the top of their hit list. So don't take your tax debt lightly, because it will not go away on its own. The IRS can seize your bank accounts, your home, and even shut down your business. Call our tax experts today at 1-800-783-0810 and let us deal with the IRS while you focus on your business. That's 1-800-783-0810. Again, that's 800-783-0810.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now, 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
Sometimes riders feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
My name is Jessie, and I'm proud of the life I have, surrounded by military and aware just how big the world really is. I have a unique perspective on life and the world around us. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you how I see it, and I won't pull any punches. This is my POV, which stands for Point of View. All right, it's Jessie. How's everybody doing out there today? Yes, I miss you when we're not talking. Now, this is a fun night. I've been looking for this toward tonight for at least a week. I'm not alone. I've got my favorite person on the line with me, at least when it comes to international and military affairs. And that would be Justin Kinney. How you doing today, Justin?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime, friend. You know that. Now, I don't think there's any shortage of topics tonight, is there?
No, it's been quite a busy last week or so in international affairs.
Oh, I know. I'm sitting here going, what's next? I mean, there was the chaos in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And the American embassy opening in Jerusalem. There was... Oh, and I actually heard from a reputable source that Gaza/Hamas turned down humanitarian aid. They turned them away.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I haven't seen that report, but that wouldn't surprise me knowing...
I got this from a
them.
first-hand account.
Wow.
Well, when you know the pilot flying the plane, you can get that kind of information. So, yet they scream to the rafters that they're not getting enough aid because the crossing into Israel is blocked, but yet when somebody tries to deliver them aid, they say, nope.
Yeah, they have incentive to make it look as bad as it can to gain a lot of favor on the international stage. They have done this in the past too. It's not the first time they've turned away aid or misused aid. They're very well known for misusing the aid that does come in, to build tunnels or whatever else instead of helping the people.
I mean, they use concrete instead of building houses and schools and hospitals to reinforce tunnels. Or am I mistaken on that?
Oh yeah, they absolutely have. I mean, there's when Hamas was elected to the Palestinian parliament or whatever it is, a lot of international aid was cut off from the U.S., the EU, I think the UN, Russia, and that was all cut off to the government, but they still provided a lot of humanitarian aid that was supposed to go to the people. That was never cut off. But a lot of that aid that kind of gets funneled in there to help the people, build hospitals, etc., schools, has frequently gone to other things instead, such as providing electricity to their tunnels into Israel, or running water, or weapons, or other things.
And it's not that we don't feel for the people that are trapped in the middle of this mess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like any situation, most of the Palestinians are peaceful people. They don't want to get involved with this. I mean, when you start looking at these protests, it's still just a fraction of the population who's there. It's there, as you said, there's a lot of people who are victims in this on the Palestinian side that should be getting aid, should be getting help, and they just aren't because Hamas and other groups like them are standing in the way, really.
And it's one of those things that every time I turn around, I'll see something about human shields being used in these areas. And that's just, I'm not one to judge people, but that's a despicable act.
It is. I would argue one of the most despicable, especially when you factor in a lot of these shields are children.
I've seen images, and not recently, thankfully, because they turned my stomach, of, those baby carriers women are fond of using and wearing on their chest to carry their babies around. I've seen images of Hamas fighters wearing infants in those carriers as vests.
Yeah, I mean, they know that the IDF and whoever else is fighting them doesn't want to fire on children or women, for that matter. They often use women as shields. And so they do this and put them in the front lines, or as you said, on their chest or whatever, to deter fire. And it's terrible. I mean, they're essentially hiding behind kids. And I would argue they are entirely 100% culpable for whatever happens in that situation.
I mean, I don't know what else to call it, but it's just absolutely horrific. I mean...
Yeah, there's not much worse you can do than hide behind a child as you're firing a gun at somebody or throwing a Molotov cocktail or whatever. I mean, hiding behind a kid, I mean, that's about as bad as it gets.
Okay, so I'm not completely crazy by saying Hamas, which is funded by Iran, is just a despicable group of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're a terrorist group. They are a little different in the sense that they have won elections. Most terrorist groups don't, but they are a terrorist group. They commit these despicable acts, hiding behind kids. I mean, they're about as evil as it gets out there.
Well, I mean, so why is it that they have all these people saying, oh, the U.S. isn't doing enough and putting us down when they're the ones turning down the aid and things like that? Why is this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one I've personally struggled with a little bit because I have a hard time seeing what's going on there and coming away thinking it's anything but Hamas's fault. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to a couple things, though. First is that because of the disparity in force, most of the casualties, for instance, in the last couple of days, are on the Palestinian side, right? They're frequently, actually, a lot of them have been Hamas fighters. But you look at it and say, well, Israel suffered no casualties. The Palestinian Hamas side suffered, I think it was 62 or something like that, 63. And so they look at things like that and say, oh, it's one-sided. It's a small power against a big one. They look at the wall, surrounding, say, the West Bank and whatever as being oppressive. And at the end of the day, these groups have become very good at using media and imagery that tug at people's heartstrings. I mean, you see a picture of a dead child, that's heartbreaking. And so people look at that and say, well, okay, the Palestinians had a couple of kids who died. Who's firing the gun? And frequently it's back on the Israelis or whoever else is firing, and they kind of disconnect themselves from the idea that those kids are almost certainly being used as human shields. Someone's firing from behind them, trying to induce fire back. And it's a complicated situation, but I think at the core, it's people see images, they ask who pulled the trigger.
And I can understand asking who pulled the trigger, but the bigger question is why.
Yeah, and I don't think the average person asks those questions, or at least doesn't go very deeply into the answers. I think it's a great question that needs to be asked, though, is why. I mean, if somebody starts firing at me and my kids, right, from behind their kids, it's horrifying. But at the end of the day, I'm going to protect my kids on my side and try to fire back. And I hope I don't hit their kid. I try to aim away. But if it happens, I would argue it's not my fault. It's the person who's hiding behind their kid and firing at me, right? I want to be the one. I don't fight. I don't fight in this battle myself personally. But if I was, I want to be the one standing in front of the kids, protecting them, not the one hiding behind the kids.
I agree. Now, I have some audio clips from the UN Security Council meeting yesterday. Now, I will note that U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, walked out before Palestine spoke, but you can bet she was briefed on it.
I saw the image on that, yeah, for walking out.
Having felt the urgent need to discuss the serious deteriorating situation in occupied Palestinian territory, in particular in the Gaza Strip, because of the heinous, deliberate crimes created by Israel against unarmed Palestinian civilians.
I mean, there's the Palestinian representative to the UN calling out Israel when they seem to be the ones causing the problem.
Yeah, as I said, I think they've done a very good job of kind of manipulating the news and some of the sources that get out there. And of course, it helps that a lot of the news media out there is on the Palestinian side. It's a tough situation. I mean, no matter how you look at it, a child dying, no matter what the cause or who pulled the trigger or why, is horrifying. It's not something that should ever happen. And I think there are people on both sides who, I think everyone wants to stop that, except the people obviously hiding behind them. The question, though, is what's causing this? And I think that's where a lot of people either aren't asking or aren't really exploring the issue, or are letting their partisan bias kind of blind them to what's really going on there.
Right. I have another audio clip here from the Palestinian representative at the UN, and I'm specifically reaching for their statements because I, being Jewish, have a natural tendency to go, oh, what did Israel say? What did the U.S. say? So that's why I'm going after the Palestinian statements this evening.
We also wish a prompt recovery to all those injured because of the brutal Israeli attack on the Palestinian people who expressed their resistance in the besieged Gaza Strip on the eve of the sacred month of Ramadan. We condemn in the most emphatic terms the odious massacre committed by Israel in the Gaza Strip. We call for a halt to the military aggression against our people immediately, and we call for a transparent, independent international inquiry to be conducted. The occupation is the main source of violence in our region. Any attempt to falsify this by some does not match reality.
Justin, do you think the, quote, occupation is the main source of tension?
No, I don't. I think it can cause tension, but I mean, when you're talking main source, I mean, there's been tension in this region since long before any occupation happened. So there's no way you can look at this logically and say that's the main cause. I do think there is tension that sparks between this because of it, and I'm not trying to say there's nothing to this argument, but there's so much else that's going on here. I would very much question anybody who tries to argue that that's the sole cause or the main cause of anything that's happening there today, because this stuff has a long history with a lot of different variables at play.
Right. I mean, it's always obvious when something is one-sided. And for weeks prior to the U.S. Embassy opening, or at least the week prior or the 2 weeks prior, I was seeing stories out of Israel that I didn't report on because I didn't want to be called out as biased or pro-Israel, that the Palestinians were setting fire to the gas lines that go into Israel or go into the Gaza Strip and blowing things up. And I'm going to pose a question to you. No one's been able to answer me.
All right. A lot of pressure, but I'll give it a shot.
What does burning down buildings and blowing up stuff in your own city or area get you?
Sympathy. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to how they're going to use those images. I mean, you're absolutely right. Logically, there's not a whole lot of sense to be made in that. But when you show a picture of a building that was blown up or torn down or something, you can put any story you want behind it. That's a heartbreaking image, and it doesn't take a whole lot to get people rallying behind a heartbreaking image. I mean, as you said, there's not a great answer to that, but when you're a small people group or a people group that's relying on external expat support or foreign support, like Hamas, being funded by Iran, but others as well, they're looking for more support. You do what you can to gain sympathy, and hope it doesn't backfire on you.
But then they also put a bounty on the lives of Israelis and Americans and pay the terrorists that go to jail or get killed. They pay them or their families up, over 50% of their aid. And then they claim they don't have enough money to feed and take care of their people.
Yeah. I mean, there's really not any good words for it, but again, they use these images. You show a picture of a starving child or a dead child or something. People don't ask a whole lot of questions as to why. It's unfortunate. Where did the money that was supposed to get to that family or that kid go? And it's too much effort, too much research for people to really understand. That money was supposed to go to that kid or whatever, and it was misused or used inefficiently or something.
Or funneled to the family of someone who killed or injured Israelis or Americans?
Yeah, I mean, and I mentioned before, there's a lot of partisanship that's going on in this particular issue and other issues as well. It's not just Israel, obviously, but there's a lot of partisanship that I think is very toxic. It blinds people to what's going on. I think you need to be able to approach an issue without thinking of it in Republican terms or Democrat terms, conservative, liberal, whatever else. You just need to approach it and look at the facts of what's going on. And that's hard because there's so much information out there, right? And you can't reasonably expect the average person on the street to know everything about this issue. And so people find shortcuts to do that, and they find people that they think they can trust, and they just parrot what somebody else says because they don't either have the time or the resolve or the energy or whatever to do the research themselves. And that's problematic when you can't necessarily trust the person that you think you can to give you the fair story.
Well, it's nice to know that I wasn't being biased when I said that while Israel defended itself, I was fairly certain they didn't fire the first shot and that this had been an ongoing conflict, particularly over the past few weeks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, this is something that's been going on for years, decades, even if you really want to push it back. The question of the first shot is always a tricky one for me because, I don't think you necessarily need to wait to be fired upon to make that shot. If somebody comes running up to me, fist raised, and they're going to punch me in the face, I don't think I necessarily have to wait for the impact to fight back. But it's obviously that's a tricky spectrum, a hard argument to make because where along that line can you be sure enough that shot is coming, right? So the idea of like preventive wars, preemptive wars, I've tried to delve into this in political science, but it's tricky because there is a moral argument that says, why do I have to wait for my citizens to be killed in order to try to defend them? That's obviously, again, really hard because if you push that too far the other way, then you may be firing a shot that was unnecessary because the other side was never going to attack you, or it was just a threat or whatever. And so it's hard to know where that line is. But I think there's at least an argument that could be made that says that who fired the first shot doesn't make a whole lot of difference.
Okay.
As long as you can be reasonably sure or quite sure that the shot was coming. I mean that's what happened with the 7 Days War with Israel, right? When they fought off Egypt primarily, but other countries as well. Israel fired the first shot there, but the reason they did is because Egypt was massing along their border, mobilizing their aircraft. I mean, they knew an attack was coming any day. And so they launched the first attack. That first strike gave them an advantage because they were able to cripple the Egyptian Air Force and really set them on a path to win that war. And that's the classic example of a moral case for firing the first shot. But there's also cases where you can't really just fire indiscriminately because you think somebody might be getting stronger, or because you think maybe 20 years from now they're gonna attack me or whatever. You have to have a pretty clear understanding that an attack is coming, and that someone is rearing back to punch you in the face.
It's not that it's coming now or it's coming very soon.
Right. And so it's obviously this is a time frame question, right? How soon is soon enough that I can fight back? And that's where you get really subjective arguments because people don't agree on that. But I do think most people would agree that you don't have to wait to be punched in the face first to defend yourself.
Well, I know I would agree. Now, similar issue also relating to Israel. The U.S. consulate became the U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. What, if any, impact, other than the fact of media attention being readily available, do you think it played in all this? And do you think it's going to be a continued source of conflict, or do you think the conflict is with everything will die down?
That's a really good question. It's hard to know for sure, obviously. I think to an extent it's just an excuse. I mean, as we've mentioned here in other shows, this isn't a conflict that just started now, right? This has been going on for a long time. I think the embassy moving is an excuse to re-up some of the animosity. I do think it will die down eventually, but But at the same time, it's probably going to be a continued source of that animosity over time, every so often, because it's something tangible that they can see. That they can make a clear argument about. Whether you agree with the argument or not is beside the point. But it's an argument that people can that people can understand, at least because they can see the building, right? They can see this. They can understand some of the cultural and history there, cultural factors in history. So in a sense, it is a cause in the sense that it's like the final straw or whatever for this particular conflict, but I don't see it as the main cause. I think it's something that's gone on a long time. I don't see it as the main cause of future conflict either, but it will be used repeatedly as the excuse for fighting anyway.
I personally would love to see an end to this conflict. However, I will say one thing that Israel does that I have some animus towards is their building of settlements in areas that are not in their traditionally held areas. They'll just plant a settlement somewhere to try and claim that territory, within the reasonable borders, but it's kind of one of those that in my mind does stir up a lot of dust.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand that neither side is 100% pure and innocent, right? I mean, both sides have done things to rile up the other side, or done things knowing it will rile up the other side. So it's not like anyone's trying to argue that one side is perfect and innocent in everything. Israel certainly makes mistakes. Israel certainly does things incorrectly at times or handles situations incorrectly. That doesn't necessarily, though, make them the culprit in everything either, right? So it's a spectrum argument. And I think you're right. Building these settlements, there are times when you start to wonder, is the cost of them higher than the benefit they're getting from it? Are they, is this something that's really necessary? It's a hard question.
Right, and there's always a cost-benefit analysis.
Absolutely.
Obviously, Israel must think it's worth it on some level because they keep doing it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, whatever their cost benefit that they've run the calculus for, they think it's worth it. I don't necessarily understand all the intricacies of it, but they certainly think that they're getting more out of it than they're losing in the process.
I don't entirely understand their calculus on that one either, but we'll have to save further debate for that for another time. But I don't think either side is going to back down anytime soon.
No, I don't think so. I mean, as you said, we would both love for this conflict to be over, right? For there to be peace and no more of this largely unnecessary bloodshed. But the skeptic in me I don't think that's particularly likely anytime soon, unfortunately.
Well, Justin, we have come to that wonderful time in the show where it is time to pay those radio station bills. So, folks, we will see you on the other side.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, Internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Attention business owners and independent contractors. This is a money-saving message from Tax Mediation Services. If your business owes $20,000 or more in taxes, we can help you today, right now. Listen, dealing with the IRS is no picnic. It's an intimidating and extremely stressful process, and you don't want to go it alone. Our attorneys know every law, every tax break, and every possible opportunity to help you resolve and reduce your tax debt. And if you owe more than $20,000, you may be at the top of their hit list. So don't take your tax debt lightly, because it will not go away on its own. The IRS can seize your bank accounts, your home, and even shut down your business. Call our tax experts today at 1-800-783-0810 and let us deal with the IRS while you focus on your business. That's 1-800-783-0810. Again, that's 800-783-0810.
My son.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't.
Thank you for hanging in there with us while we paid those radio station bills. Yes, we are back. Justin, I think we pretty much did what we could on the Israel-Gaza-Palestinian conflict. I don't think there's much more to say there.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything there is there, at least for now. I'm sure something else will spark tomorrow.
Oh, just like the rock throwing and Molotov cocktail throwing of Hamas. I'm sorry, but that's how I see it, folks. It's a powder keg waiting for a match. Any match. The thought of a match. Now, speaking of powder kegs and things that go boom, we pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everyone says, oh, it was such a hard deal on Iran. And I'm sitting here going, how? Because I don't see this being a hard deal on Iran. I see this as basically being a harder thing for us to deal with, because military bases were off limits to inspection. There was enough in some cases, in some locations, the Iranians were permitted to gather their own samples. Never mind the lead time that the inspectors were required to give before conducting an inspection. How was this such a hard deal on Iran?
Yeah, so I think the idea here is that any sort of deal that wasn't giving them everything they wanted was going to be seen as restrictive. But you're right. I mean, this wasn't particularly hard on them. In fact, it was a lot more lenient than any deal that I would have put in place. Anyway,
you're not alone, friend.
I don't know how much that says, but I thought it was actually pretty lenient. Really, just kind of kicked the can down the road a few years with the nuclear program, and that's assuming everything went according to plan, which, as you kind of alluded to, with the ability to check on some of these things, there was a lot that we couldn't monitor.
I mean, we gave up the right to access any military base, and I'm not the biggest military strategist in the world, but if you're going to build a nuclear bomb, you're not going to do it at a public library in the middle of the city. You're going to do it on a military base. Or am I missing something?
That's where I would do it. I'm not a nuclear scientist, so maybe they have other logic involved, but I certainly would look for a military base or something akin to a military base.
You're not going to build it where just anybody can wander in, wander out, and especially if you're Iran, at a place that can be inspected. Then you also have the fact that Iran has approximately 70,000 fighters, either actual Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps most notably the Quds Force, which isn't subject to the regular Iranian Defense Department. It answers only to the Ayatollah in Syria, plus not to mention their paid militia fighters and terrorists sitting right on the Syrian border with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't happen overnight.
No.
And Iran is also building weapons factories in Yemen, and they're trying to get a bigger foothold in Lebanon, not to mention, the sizable spots they have in Syria. So why, if this was such a quote-unquote restrictive and harsh deal for Iran, is it something that Iran is trying to keep, at least when it comes to the European countries?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the main reason is economics. We've actually started to see since Trump has said we're pulling out of the Iran deal, several European companies that were going to be investing in projects in Iran have started to back out of those as well. There was a French energy company called Total that's starting to pull out. It's a Danish company. I saw a German insurance company. And so there's a lot of companies that were going to or had plans to invest in Iran for various reasons, depending on the industry, obviously, that are now starting to rethink some of those decisions because the U.S. is pulling out. They're worried that the sanctions might curb their ability to make money or to exist in Iran. So I think Iran is looking at this as an economic problem, at least when it comes to this particular aspect of it, because they're losing investment at this point. Now you could, of course, argue that they may not be following their end of the deal. That was certainly Israel's argument when they snuck in and escaped with a bunch of these discs and images and things. But I think Iran is looking at this as a chance to really boost their economy. If the U.S. had stayed in and pulling out, they're trying their best to keep it intact for the rest of the countries that are involved, which is mostly Europe.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, Iran, which is one of the most heavily sanctioned nations in the world, doesn't want to go back to the nobody will do business with this category.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it.
As always, I think the innocent civilians, i.e. the Iranian people, are caught in the middle. And that's why there have been the protests in Iran and things like that, which, believe it or not, are still going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're not going on in as drastic a numbers. In fact, I think I've got the right clip pulled up. Nikki Haley read some wonderful words earlier this year that were the words of citizens of Iran, mostly taken from social media, but she gave voice to them.
All these brigades have come out to the streets. They've come out against the leader. Political prisoners must be freed. Independence, freedom, Iranian Republic. Neither Gaza nor Lebanon, my life only for Iran. Let go of Syria, think of us. We will die, but we'll take Iran back. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid, we're all together. And in reference to the Supreme Leader, quote, feel some shame, let go of the country. Those are not my words. Those are not the words of the United States. Those are the words of the brave people of Iran.
And I think those words spoke volumes then, and they still do now, because it's clear that those are accurate statements, that the average Iranian citizen doesn't want any part of any of these other conflicts. And wasn't the Iran nuclear deal supposed to modify their behavior?
It was supposed to, I think. But I mean, you're making a fantastic point, and just the average person there, like we were talking about with Palestine before the commercial break, the average person's a victim in this, right? They're not an enemy of Palestine, they're not an enemy of Israel, Iran, they're not an enemy of the West. They're people who are victims. I mean, they're more victims than anyone else in this Iran situation. And these are people that need help. And I love that clip from Nikki Haley because I think it really shows that you can't treat Iran as some sort of uniform, single entity. There's the people in power and there's the people on the streets. And those are very different, and they have different interests and different goals. And they frequently disagree with one another.
But as we both know well, there is no freedom of speech in Iran. So these protesters were literally taking their lives in their hands. In fact, the woman that became the iconic image, holding up her hijab and waving it after having removed it, was sent to Evin prison.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, these people are incredibly brave for what they're doing on the ground. They're really putting their life on the line for what they believe in, and that's admirable.
I just wish there was some way to directly help the Iranian people and bypass the government. I mean, this is the same thing I have thought about several countries in this world. The government needs to go soak its head and literally have a revolution and let the people that truly want freedom in that country take over.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's not likely to happen. Once you're in power, you're not really keen on giving it up. Unfortunately, it's just a issue of the human condition, I guess.
No one gives up power easily. And speaking of giving up power or the appearance of power, let's turn to my favorite duck, Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, so there's been a lot going on there as well recently, hasn't there?
Oh, you mean the fact that North Korea has already broken their word again?
Of course, they wouldn't see it that way. But, I mean, you're right. They have basically, well, they pulled out of the South Korea talks, and they're threatening to pull out of the U.S. ones right now.
Right, and okay, there was a chance for true peace on that peninsula. Now, and some lifting of sanctions, and I'd even heard comments that we were going to reduce some of the, help them economically once they made good on their promises. And I don't see why they would pull out of such a thing so readily just to gain a foothold. I mean, this is after this all these joint statements. And here's a translator speaking for Kim Jong-un at the North Korea-South Korea talks.
We hope to open a new era of peace, and we have reaffirmed our commitment to such peace. And all of the declarations and agreements will be implemented for the two Koreas.
I mean, those words right there say that he's on board, but yet, he also then went on to say,
and we hope that we will not repeat our mistakes in the past,
well, guess what? And yes, he went on to continue, but I think by shutting down talks with South Korea, threatening to cancel the summit with the United States, he's doing exactly that. Now, I've also heard it speculated that Kim Jong-un has already gotten what he wanted, which was attention on the world stage.
Yeah, I mean, I have a tendency to think this was always the play, is that he was going to agree to talks and then use them as some sort of bargaining chip. And because, I mean, at this point, they have very little to lose, right? I mean, worst case scenario, they kind of go back to status quo, right? There's not like we're going to put more sanctions on them or whatever else, or trade less. We already don't do that. So that there's not much that they have to lose here. There's really only gain. And I just believe this was kind of always the play, or at least an option, that he was going to use this to manipulate and try to get something extra out of the deal before we even sat down at the table.
I don't think he was ever serious. I think he was speaking with forked tongue. And while he got that wonderful visuals, I just don't think he meant anything that he said. And the people that I feel most sorry for are the Koreans that were hoping to see their families, the families that were separated by the war.
Yeah, we keep talking about the people on the ground as the real victims here, and I think that applies here as well. I do want to mention, though, there is, regardless of anything else, if the summit doesn't happen and everything pulls out, we can still count this as a positive from the United States perspective, because those 3 American prisoners who were released, bare minimum, I think that counts as a win. That's a good thing, no matter how you really look at it. But I think you're right that was pretty much as far as it was ever going to go, unless the U.S. and South Korea made some pretty drastic changes as well, that he was trying to get, quitting their military exercises or pulling U.S. troops out or whatever else he wanted.
And I don't see us pulling troops out when there's still a credible threat. I mean, and I was wondering about the fact when he came back from China saying, yes, we'll denuclearize, when they had just started up a second reactor. And I'm sitting here going, this doesn't play right.
Yeah, I mean, Kim Jong-un has done very little over the years to engender any sort of real trust. I think he would. I mean, the prisoners, I guess, is a nice step. It's a nice gesture, a good step in the right direction. But that's one thing that he's done over the last decade or more that he's been in power. Actually, no. He's only been in power 7 years now, 6 or 7 years,
something like that.
Going back to his father and everything too. I mean, they just don't have a whole lot of currency in the trust bank, right? I mean, they haven't built up much over the years, and a single act, I would argue, should not be enough for us to start making major concessions like pulling our troops out or denuclearizing. I think that would be a huge mistake.
I agree. Now, I went to one of my least favorite web news websites, and I'm putting news in air quotes, not that you can see it today. I went to KCNA, aka North Korean propaganda news site, and there's some really interesting statements in here.
Unlike what?
Oh, however, even before the ink on the historic April 27th declaration got dry, the South Korean authorities in the U.S. started a military drill against the DPRK, reacting to all the peace-loving efforts and good intentions shown by the DPRK with rude and wicked provocation, and arousing serious concern and disappointment among all the fellow countrymen and the international community, wanting the declaration to be implemented. The other one was, the South Korean authorities in particular are resorting to such improper acts quite contrary to the promise to make efforts for the peace, prosperity, and reunification of the peninsula, together with the North, and leaving even human scum to brazenly hurl mud at the dignity of the supreme leadership of the DPRK and its system, and play down the Panmunjom Declaration at the building of the National Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then the historic Panmunjom Declaration cannot be implemented by the efforts of a single party, and it can result in a good fruition only when two parties create favorable conditions and climate by pooling their efforts. And I apologize. Excuse me, Mr. Frog. You're not needed. I apologize for stumbling over the wording, but let's just face it, North Korean English is not the best.
No, I mean, anytime you translate something, you're always going to have issues. It's not your native language.
But it's just it makes me crack up because they agreed to the key resolve exercises, which were larger in scale than the exercises they're currently screaming about. You know, and they're calling these large scale, but they're just air combat drills. Now, granted, the B-52 was involved, and they're calling it, you know, a strategic nuclear bomber. Yes, it can carry the nuclear bomb, but that's not its only potential payload.
Right.
And they're also calling out the F-22 Raptor stealth fighters. Guess what, guys? That ain't our only stealth plane. I mean, you know, it's the B-2 that's stealth, I believe.
I believe so, but that's not my area.
Not totally mine either, and I always have to double check, but it's one of those... Guys, we did Key Resolve, which was a peninsula-wide exercise. And I checked with some of the military service members I know currently on the peninsula, yes, including my husband. He didn't even know there was anything going on. And during Key Resolve, the entire peninsula knew. Service members weren't allowed anywhere in civilian clothes. They weren't, you know, there was all kinds of restrictions. And this one, it was like, oh, there was something going on. So obviously, Key Resolve was had a much larger peninsula-wide impact, and now they go stamping their feet, throwing a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here going, I don't get it. Oh, and then of course, they tried to call the U.S. out for human rights violations.
I always find that amusing.
Yeah, where executions are a country where executions are public, and if you're like 12 or 13 or older, you have to attend. It's called, wait a minute. And of course, they're calling us out for barbaric massacres committed during the last Korean War. I mean, I understand we probably did some bad things during the Korean War. AKA, there's the word war. War is never clean, war is never pretty, unless I'm off here.
Right.
And they said that the U.S.-style capitalism is a paradise for only a handful of the privileged, but a, quote, hell, unquote, for the absolute majority of the toiling masses, and that it will certainly be defeated in the human rights confrontation with Korean-style socialism, a flower garden for the people, full of respect and love.
Oh, man, that's interesting.
I mean, I swear some days I need duct tape around my head to keep it from exploding when I read this stuff. But it's also hilarious.
It is, yeah. I mean, in kind of a sad way that people believe that, but yeah, I mean, it is funny.
And even today, the U.S. is growing desperate to deprive the Korean people of the sovereignty and the rights to existence and development through vicious economic blockade and sanctions. It's a mockery of human rights for such a country to trumpet their human rights performance and put down the DPRK's human rights.
Yeah.
No offense, what human rights? I mean,
yeah.
North Korea essentially dumped a dead body on our doorstep with Otto Warmbier.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear them come out, countries like that try to bash others on human rights when they themselves, are some of the worst violators.
It reminds me of a saying about glass houses and throwing stones.
Yeah.
So, all right, Justin, we have reached the bottom of the hour, just about. So why don't you remind people where they can hang out with you when you're not on the air, hanging out with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me in two places. I'm on Twitter. You can find me there. My handle is at Justin R_Kinney. That's Kinney. And you can also find me on Facebook. I have an author page for my fiction novels. That's J. Robert Kinney.
Novels, is there something I need to know?
I have another one that I'm currently working on. I'm in kind of the last stages of my editing process. So we'll see.
Outstanding. All right, and you can find me on Twitter at Radio Host Jesse, and you can email me at the station at jessie'spov@klrnradio.com. I'm gone.